All right, let's dive into something everyone's talking about these days, universal basic income, or as most people know it, UBI. And we're going deep. I mean, really deep. We've got a whole stack of sources here, from that Wikipedia rabbit hole we all love, to articles covering the latest UBI trials, and even a bit from the Encyclopedia Britannica, about automation and how it's changing everything.
So we're going to figure this whole thing out. UBI. Utopian dream, practical fix. Or maybe a little bit of both.
Exactly. And you know what's fascinating? UBI is not some brand new idea. It's been around for ages, like way back. Wikipedia even mentions Thomas Paine, the revolutionary guy. He was already talking about this kind of thing back in the 1700s.
Wow, really?
Yeah, called it a stakeholder grant for young adults.
It's amazing how these ideas keep popping up through history. And get this, even Roman emperors were experimenting with basic income, like Nero and Trajan giving grain to citizens.
Ancient UBI.
Exactly. Makes you wonder if there's something kind of fundamental to this whole concept.
Right, like is it in our nature or something? But then you've got the Alaska Permanent Fund. People point to that as the only real UBI example we have. But it's just a yearly dividend, not a full-blown, like, everyone gets paid system.
Alaska's interesting.
Yeah.
But whether it's really achieved what UBI aims for, like less poverty, more entrepreneurs, that's debatable. But what's really got people talking now are these new UBI trials.
Oh, absolutely. That study by Sam Altman, the OpenAI CEO, $60 million, 3,000 people getting $1,000 a month.
That's huge.
Yeah, a total game changer. And the best part, they mostly spent it on basic stuff. Rent, food, essentials. So much for that argument that people would just waste the money.
It really challenges a lot of the assumptions, both for and against UBI. I mean, remember those stories from the study?
Yeah, the personal accounts.
Like Sarah, who used the money for her kids' braces and a graduation trip, that wished she'd saved more.
Makes it real, doesn't it?
It does. And then Celine, that struggling mom who used the money to get back on her feet and eventually find a job.
Those stories, they're what makes this whole UBI thing so much more than just numbers and economics.
It's about people's lives.
Exactly. But then you look at what's happening in Oregon with that ballot measure trying to actually implement UBI, and you realize how messy it can get. Politically, I mean.
For sure. You've got businesses worried about costs, politicians arguing about budgets and federal aid. It shows you that even if UBI makes sense on paper, actually putting it into practice, that's a whole other challenge.
It really is. It feels like we're at this turning point with UBI. Like everyone's talking about it, but no one knows for sure what's going to happen. So let's get to the heart of it. What are the big arguments for and against making UBI a reality?
Okay, let's start with the pro-UBI side. One of the most common arguments, and this even pops up in older sources like Encyclopedia Britannica, is that UBI could be crucial as automation starts changing the job market.
Like a safety net for when the robots take over.
Exactly.
And it's not just, fringe thinkers saying this. You've got big names like Andrew Yang and even Elon Musk backing the idea.
They're definitely some of the more vocal proponents. But even within the pro-UBI camp, there are some who say just focusing on income misses the bigger picture. What about education? Healthcare, even just social connection.
Right, like, is UBI just throwing money at a problem without addressing the deeper issues? It kind of reminds me of that point in Encyclopedia Britannica about natural inequalities.
Oh, yeah. That's a loaded term.
For sure.
What are they even talking about there? Inherent differences in ability, circumstances people are born into, and how does that play into the UBI debate?
Big questions.
Definitely.
But let's not forget the other big arguments for UBI. Reducing poverty. Simplifying welfare.
Right. But even those have counter-arguments.
Yeah, of course.
Like proponents say UBI creates a fairer system, while critics in Encyclopedia Britannica argue that giving everyone the same amount, regardless of need, could actually worsen those natural inequalities.
Interesting. Then there's the whole cost issue. Can we actually afford it? Will it mean higher taxes or crazy inflation?
And of course, the big one. Will people stop working if they're getting free money?
Right.
That really gets at the heart of how we view work and motivation.
Sure.
But then you've got UBI supporters saying it could actually boost entrepreneurship.
Because people would have the financial security to take risks.
Exactly. They'd be free to pursue their ideas without the constant pressure of making ends meet.
It's like a grand social experiment. But we need to look at what's actually happening in these UBI trials, not just speculate.
Absolutely.
So tell me.
What are we seeing? In the Artman study, for example, people did work a bit less on average, but they didn't just quit their jobs entirely.
Interesting. So it's not as simple as, free money equals everyone becomes lazy.
Not at all. The reality is much more nuanced.
It seems like with UBI, things are never black and white.
Nope.
There's a lot of gray area, a lot we still
Pretty.
don't know. And that brings us to another huge part of this discussion. How does UBI fit into the future of work? Especially with automation changing everything so fast.
Yeah. That's where things get really interesting. And maybe even a little sci-fi.
We've got this idea in our heads of robots taking over all the jobs. But is UBI really the answer to that? Our sources suggest maybe even more radical solutions.
Yeah, it's like we're stepping into some futuristic movie or something.
Yeah.
Altman, the guy from the study, he actually talks about universal basic compute.
Universal basic what now?
Compute. Like, instead of everyone getting cash, they get a share of AI processing power.
Whoa, hold on. AI processing power. That sounds like something straight out of the Matrix.
Right.
Like, are we all going to be plugged in getting a monthly allowance of algorithms?
It's a wild concept, but it does make you think about how technology is forcing us to completely rethink work and income.
I guess in the future, we might not be earning a paycheck from a 9-to-5 job, but from how well we can use AI.
Potentially.
That's pretty mind-blowing. But I can already hear the skeptics out there, like, hey, we haven't even figured out regular UBI yet, and now we're talking about divvying up artificial intelligence.
It's a lot to process, for sure.
It is. But I guess that's the point. UBI, it's just one piece of this massive puzzle, this whole future of work thing.
Exactly. And as we try to wrap our heads around it, we have to be open to all sorts of possibilities, even the ones that seem crazy now.
Okay, so let's bring it back down to earth for a sec. Let's say we do go the UBI route. What would that actually look like? Not just the trials, but long-term. How would it change society?
Well, that's where things get really interesting. Some people, they see this utopian future where UBI frees everyone up to follow their passions, leading to this explosion of creativity and innovation.
So like a world full of artists and entrepreneurs.
Yeah, people starting businesses, investing in their own skills and talents.
Yeah.
Because they have the financial security to do so.
Sounds pretty idyllic. But let's be realistic. Couldn't it also go the other way? Like people getting complacent, just sitting around watching TV all day?
That's the fear, for sure. What if UBI leads to less productivity, less motivation?
Apathy.
Right.
But even in that Altman study, people didn't completely disengage from work.
So maybe it comes down to human nature.
Like some people are self-motivated no matter what, and others need that external pressure to get things done.
Could be.
Maybe UBI would be like a sorting hat, showing us who thrives with freedom and who needs a push.
And then there's the question of support systems. Even if we do UBI, what else do people need to make it work?
Because we've seen mixed results from the trials, right?
Yeah, some people flourish without financial security, others struggle.
Like Sarah from the study.
Exactly.
She used the money to help her kids, but then wished she'd saved more.
It highlights the need for things like financial literacy programs.
Right. We can't just give people money and assume they know what to do with it.
Especially if they've never had that kind of financial stability before.
It's like giving someone a powerful tool without any instructions.
Exactly.
It could be amazing, but it could also backfire spectacularly.
So it's not just about the money itself. It's about empowering people to use it wisely.
Okay, I'm starting to see the bigger picture. UBI isn't a magic solution. It's a complex tool.
And like any tool, it needs to be used correctly.
And that brings us back to those arguments against UBI. People worrying about laziness or a sense of entitlement.
Right. But maybe those concerns could be addressed if we have the right support systems in place.
So instead of UBI being a crutch, it could be a springboard.
Check. Yeah.
If people have the knowledge and resources to make the most of it.
And that's where education comes in.
Not just about managing money, but also about adapting to a changing world.
Especially with automation constantly reshaping the job market.
Those skills are going to be essential.
Absolutely.
But let's zoom out a bit. Beyond the individual level, what about the impact on society as a whole? If UBI became widespread, how would it change our communities, our institutions?
That's a question with so many possible answers. Some people believe it could strengthen communities.
How so?
By reducing financial stress and inequality, leading to lower crime rates, better health, more people getting involved in their communities.
Imagine neighborhoods where everyone feels secure, where they have the time and energy to contribute.
It's a hopeful vision.
It is. But couldn't there also be unintended consequences?
Oh, definitely.
Like what happens to our current social safety net? Do we still need traditional welfare programs?
And how do we prevent a two-tiered system where people on UBI are seen as different or less deserving?
We're getting into some complicated territory here.
We are.
It seems like UBI could both unite and divide us.
It all depends on how it's implemented and the values it reflects.
And that's what makes this whole discussion so important. We have to think critically about what kind of society we want. Is UBI a step towards a more just and equitable future? Or does it risk making things worse?
It's a question we all need to grapple with.
Wow, we've really gone down the rabbit hole here, from ancient Rome to, AI economies.
It's been quite a journey.
It has, but it all boils down to this question, doesn't it? What do we as a society owe to each other?
And that's a tough one. Our sources have shown us there's no easy answer. The arguments for and against UBI, they're all tangled up with our values, our fears, our hopes.
We've talked about the potential benefits. Less poverty, more people starting businesses, and a workforce that can adapt to all this crazy automation. But we've also looked at the downsides.
The cost, the possibility of people becoming less motivated, and the challenge of making sure UBI is fair for everyone.
Right. It's not as simple as just giving everyone money.
Not at all. And what really struck me is how UBI forces us to confront our own ideas about work and wealth. Like, are we okay with the idea of a safety net for everyone, no matter what their situation is?
Or do we believe that help should only go to certain people?
Based on specific criteria.
It's like UBI is holding a mirror up to society.
Showing us our beliefs about who deserves help and who doesn't.
And those stories from the Altman study, they really brought that home.
They did.
Like Sarah, who wished she'd saved more.
And Celine, who used UBI to get back on her feet.
It shows how complicated human behavior is.
Right. UBI isn't just about money. It's about understanding how people will actually use that money.
And what they need to make the most of it. It's about empowering people, not just creating dependency.
That's a crucial point.
So we need to go beyond just talking about UBI in theory. We need to look at the evidence, the actual results from these real-world trials.
What's the data showing?
How does UBI affect things like health and education, community involvement?
Those are the questions we need to answer.
To figure out if UBI actually lives up to the hype.
And we can't forget about the ethical questions.
Right, like how do we balance individual freedom with responsibility to society?
How do we make sure UBI is fair and just for everyone?
So to everyone listening, don't just take in information about UBI passively. Go deeper.
Do your own research.
Read the arguments.
Listen to people's stories.
Ask yourself the hard questions. What do you believe about work, wealth, helping others?
And think about how UBI could affect your own community.
The world we live in.
The future isn't set in stone.
Yeah.
It's something we create.
Through our choices and actions.
UBI is just one possibility.
One tool among many.
It's up to us to decide how to use it.
Thanks for joining us on this deep dive into universal basic income. We hope you've learned something new. And maybe even have more questions now than when we started.
That's what it's all about.
Keep exploring, keep learning, and until next time, keep diving deep.